Good evening, and welcome to Community, Culture, and New Americans. For Vermont Public, I'm Fran Stoddard, your host tonight, and we're going to explore the many multifaceted experiences of new Americans in our state. In the last 4 decades, over 8,000 refugees have started new lives in Vermont, according to the U.S. Committee on Refugees and Immigrants. Over 30,000 Vermont residents, or 5% of us, are immigrants from all corners of the globe, and 3 in 5 of those are naturalized U.S. citizens. For our panel this evening, we turn to the leadership from the Vermont New American Advisory Council, an organization made up of an ethnically, culturally, and linguistically diverse group of new American leaders who work with many sectors across the state. I'd first like to welcome Mohamed Jafar. Born in Kenya, his family settled in Burlington when he was 7 years old. Mohamed now works with the city of Burlington as a court diversion coordinator and pretrial services coordinator, providing services to individuals at the intersection of mental health struggles, substance abuse, and criminal justice system. Mohamed, welcome. And I'm going to start with a very important question for you in particular this evening. First and foremost, before I even introduce the rest of the panel, there have recently been discussions about the use of the term New Americans. And some embrace it, others feel it is not a good description for refugees or immigrant communities, and some outright reject it. What are your thoughts, and what is the term that we can best use this evening?
I think that's a great question, and I will humbly say I'm not sure that I have the answer. As someone who's lived here for about 20 years now, I guess I wouldn't consider myself a new American, but the term still feels home to me, and that's a term that I personally have found community in, that I've always used. But I do think that there has been discussion, and there is room for discussion about what term people feel is comfortable for them, and everyone is different. So right now, for me, I would say New Americans is fitting. It's what, like I said, that I found community in, the term that I found community in, but for perhaps the other folks on the panel might have some other thoughts. And other folks in community, of course, there are people that are very new to the United States and the state of Vermont, right? That are generally new Americans. At being here 20 years, I wouldn't consider myself a new American, but that is still the term that I use.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll get to important content in a minute, but I do want to introduce everyone that's here. And as I do, if you have an opinion about the term New American, please let us know. So I'd next like to introduce Sandrine Kibuey. She is the president of the Vermont New American Advisory Council, and she's originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo, has been in the U.S. since 1997, and Vermont since 2006. Sandrine, who has worked internationally and locally in rural development for decades, is currently the director of the Housing Advocacy Programs Team, which is a program of the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity, or as many of us know it, CVOEO. Welcome, Sandrine.
Thank you. Thank you, Fran, for having me and my colleagues here to discuss this very important subject. I think that you just introduced me perfectly. So I don't have anything else to add when it comes to introducing myself. When it comes to the term New American, I would just say, as Mohamed has said it very well, it does ring very good to me. And I do understand that some people might have kind of an objection to the fact that there is a new there, and it distinguishes them from, being, an American or an American citizen or considered or belonging to the United States. But I think that for the get-go, we came here all as newcomers, and the fact that a term way better than alien, I think it's acceptable to me. It's a term that I have used for years. It's a term that I use for myself. It's I have nothing else to say about that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. Also with us is Jeetan Khadka, who is currently working at as an employment and training counselor with the Association of Africans Living in Vermont, or AALV, which is a leading Vermont nonprofit that supports the refugee and immigrant community. Jeetan helps refugees and immigrants find jobs. He builds relationships with employers, acts as a cultural broker, a very important position, and supports employees for success in their jobs. I'd like to get to the content, but Jeetan, do you have anything extra you want to say about the term New American before we leave that?
Sure. Thanks, Fran, for having us on the show. As you know, as my colleague said, Sandrine, Mohamed, I used to feel something when I was like, so when I'm going to be all American, like when I'm going to graduate, So I think it's all about the process, and as Sandrine say, we were new, but the term American, that connects us, right? We all live in this country. We all, are American here, and I think eventually we all will be, we are. I think the reason and the creation of this organization is to help people understand the civic process, the democracy of this country, and the beauty that this country has to offer. So I think the term does not bother me as much, but I understand, the way some people think it is, not right or wrong,
So maybe check in with people about that when you ask them. So Aden Haji's family, our last panelist, his family migrated from Kenya in 2003 as part of the first Somali Bantus to resettle here in Burlington. A Burlington High School and University of Vermont graduate, Aden is currently the employment specialist at Pathways Vermont. He also served as a commissioner on the Burlington School Board from 2019 to 2021. Welcome to you, Aden. Any new nuance that you want to add to this term, New American?
Yeah, again, thank you for having us. And I think just the last bit that I wanted to share was that it's good that we're having these type of conversations, because there are a lot of folks who are still processing the term of a New American and what that means for identity. And it's good that folks are having those conversations out there. So.
Okay. And before we get to the content, we have a lot of content we would like to cover, but I've asked all of our panelists just to, in just a minute or two, what was their story about why and how they came to the United States and then Vermont. And let's start again with Mohamed.
So my story, I guess, I mean, again, I was young, so I didn't have much of a choice. I wish my parents would ask, but again, I was very young. So my family originally fled civil strife in Somalia and ended up in Kenya in the refugee camp that the United Nations has, which now houses over 20,000 people. And so that's how my family got here. Also, similar to Aden's, actually, Aden's and my family were among those first families that were resettled here in Vermont from that refugee camp. So also came here in 2003. That's how we ended up here. I've since grown up here and kind of made it my home. My family of 13 people still lives here. So that's how I got here. And I don't know if I'll ever be leaving, but I'm here for now.
Awesome. And Sandrine?
Yes. Arrived to the United States from the Democratic Republic of Congo, specifically Kinshasa. I get here to study. That was the primary reason I came to the United States, and the situation in the country changed rapidly. And applying for asylum, I was then in the New Hampshire area, Manchester, New Hampshire to be precise, and decided to move to Vermont for personal reasons, and this is where I decided to stay. And I will be staying because I do really believe this is where I really feel a sense of belonging. So, yeah.
All right. And Jeetan?
Similar to Mohamed, my family also came. They were I would say, some of the first people to come to Vermont from Nepal as a refugee. My family lived in Nepal as a refugee for about 16, 17 years. I was only 1.5 when we had to flee our country, Bhutan, to go to live in Nepal. And I don't know much about what happened, but I do know, from a little bit of story that I hear from my grandparents, that it was not safe for us to be there. It was, a lot of political unrest and persecution that was happening then. So came to Vermont in 2008. It was like around this time actually, September, and we didn't choose Vermont. Vermont chose us. So I always say I was adopted by Vermont, and I've been living here for almost almost 13, 14 years, and I love it. I have my grandparents, they live around here. All my uncles, they're kind of like, branching out to the deeper side of Vermont, buying property, buying farmland, and now, going back to roots and stuff, which is very beautiful. And I think being able to do that in Vermont just reminds us, or makes me feel I'm at home. So I'm not going anywhere. You'll hear this voice 20, 30 years after now, but I am rooted here.
Great. Thank you. And Aden, your story.
Yeah, so I have a similar story as with Mohamed as well. We came in 2003, part of the first wave of Somali Bantus. And I wouldn't be surprised if I was sitting next to Mohamed on the airplane, since it was so similar, But we came here for like new opportunities in education, and then the rest is history. So
Okay. So let's get into some of really what's going on. One of the most challenging things, and I'll start with Sandrine here, is cultural. Culturally, the United States can be extremely different from the countries that new Americans are coming from. Talk to us about some of the most challenging cultural aspects to adjust to.
A way for anybody to communicate is through language. It's through language written. It's through language spoken. It's through language with, signs, body language. So that's the most difficult, depending on, the level of absorption of information that you can grasp. So, and, it depends on the age that you have, it depends on the level of education that you have. It's about the access to, opportunities to learn the language. That's one of the most important and the most impactful in anybody's lives. And in this parlor, as you see, the English is spoken, the English is understood. We still have our accent, and I love that. But still, it's a process, and we definitely can identify that as the first one. One of the more difficult one is social responsibility, and specifically when it comes to the civic portion of it. This is what VNAAC was created. In being part of the society, being part of a community, we should have, that impact on deciding on how we do decide on the way we do live. And of course, being from different part of the world, we are used to different experiences and different norms, the different laws. And because most of the people, or most of us that came here through, means to be safe. So fleeing from situation of, danger, death, political unrest, and such, it's very difficult to understand and know and really trust the laws, because it's not something that we have experienced anyway, in any shape or form. Most countries that we fled from are authoritarian countries, meaning that there is a very clear way people actually decide on the way you are living, but also what you are or have the right to, not only to do, but what you have. So huge impact there. I do believe there is also, when it comes to norms, and I'm going to talk more about um, the way that it is understood, that what are we actually able to do in the context of our own culture, the reflection of what we as newcomers could be doing that is not in the best in the best view taken by the people around us. Maybe normal for us, not necessarily normal for others. And sometimes it has an impact legally, which is very sad. But it comes always to learning, knowing,
Right.
understanding. And this is something that I think that there's a huge gap here when it comes to what we are used to coming through, and what we are able to actually learn about the new environment in which we're going to live. Usually, it's fast. It's a fast world, and you have to learn fast. You have to learn living very fast. You have to learn a lot of things that you might not be. That actually, I can tell you, I have not assimilated at the time, and I was even coming here as a student, and then to tell you to actually navigate all those little processes, system and all, it takes a lot. So I was single. Can you imagine coming with 5, 6 children?
Right.
So you know, there is also the they said that, you know, the attire is very different, and that also, I think it's a problem of acceptance. I do believe that the community need to be the community receiving newcomers, because the culture is already established. It's because the society have norms already established. They need to be prepared to the different, you know, the cultural shock they're gonna
Yeah. And
have.
be patient. And be
Exactly.
patient.
Yes.
Yes, and actually very welcoming to another way of looking, and
Exactly.
and being right. I'd like to bring another voice in, if it's
Yes.
okay. I'm sure there's so much deeper we can go, but
Yes.
you talked about safety and trust, and I know Mohamed works in the criminal justice area. So just a little bit about that cultural adjustment to trust, to feel safe, to do what you need to do to feel safe. Can we talk briefly about that?
Yeah, are you asking me?
Yeah, Mohamed, sorry.
Absolutely, no worries. And just to clarify a little bit, so right now in my current role, I'm actually with the city of Burlington as a racial equity consultant. So that was my most previous role. So my apologies, I should have clarified that. But yeah, I mean, in terms of trust, I guess one thing that I learned, especially in that role, I was in that role for 2 years, and one thing I learned in terms of trust is that culturally there is, as President Sandrine just noted, there is a huge gap in terms of education for our parents, and there's a cultural gap as well. So there's a lot that our youth are seeing, or we as young people might be seeing, both in the school systems and regular day-to-day, that our parents aren't necessarily seeing. So especially with the judicial system, there was a huge gap between what we were experiencing, or what we were sharing we were experiencing with our parents, and how our parents would see a lot of those concerns, right? So coming from the cultures that we come from, oftentimes authority is not questioned, elders are not questioned, and so when a police officer says this happened, you know, parents are not questioning the police officer, they're often believed. And so when you couple that with the culture of the United States and policing in the United States, and them not having the knowledge, there is a huge disconnect in how they're able to support their kiddos to be able to kind of thrive in this world. So with the system in itself, you know, what I would often see is that people are coming in, and the system in itself and the supports that it has isn't diverse. The court system, right, is pretty white. The judges are white, the attorneys are white, the public defenders, everybody is white, except a lot of the folks that are coming in that need the services, whether it's pretrial services or any other services that they may need, are oftentimes, not oftentimes, but very often enough that it's notable, are people of color. So in terms of trust, it's really difficult to have trust with a system that has historically not created that trust. And so I think that there's a lot of work that we need to do in fostering a little bit more of that trust. And again, people coming from other countries do not understand the laws. There's a gap between the folks that are going to school and that may be familiar with the laws, and the parents whom are coming into this world and have way too many other things to worry about to try to understand the nuances of the laws here and how the judicial system works here. Culturally, we come again from a place where authority is viewed in a whole different manner, in a whole different way, and oftentimes it is not questioned. And even parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts. So definitely adding all that to the mix, room to be had in terms of making sure that safety and genuine trust is created among newcomers, as Sandrine would say, that are coming here.
So a lot of patience, some education, a lot
Not
needs
some,
to happen
Fran.
there.
Not some. Education, it's very, very important. Knowledge is very important, and the gap is huge there.
Yeah. Jeetan or Aden, do you want to add anything to this piece? We have a couple of other subjects that we'd like to get to, but I don't want to miss if there's something like, oh, culturally, this really needs to be brought up at this time.
I was going to say, like earlier when Sandrine was talking, one thing that we were kind of told that USA means you start again. Like when you come to this country, like, it's a fresh start, and there are a lot of things that we have to leave behind. We have left behind, and now coming to this country, starting new with different challenges and different opportunity, it can be very difficult. And given that there are so many layers to the system here, that can, it's very difficult, even given the language being a barrier. That's why, if somebody is 3 steps ahead, refugees and immigrants can always be 3 or 4 steps behind in terms of understanding the system in this country. So that's why, we need more, initiative like, the one that we're doing in terms of civic engagement in our community.
Terrific. Absolutely. And Aden, I'll move on to jobs, unless there's something that is also for you, like, oh, this is what my experience was of this cultural gap.
Yeah, Aden, but yeah, I think I would just add on that, like, it's complicated juggling 2 worlds, and it's hard to seek for help if you don't know where to get it or who to ask. But it's important for like services to be out there for newcomers, where it meets where they are, depending on language or just like being able to accommodate is really critical. But I'm sure we'll talk more about that later in the show.
Great. Well, these are all things to really think about as we try to put ourselves in a position of what that experience must be like to come here from away. So the other thing that's kind of, to me, when new Americans come here, they don't have much time after their arrival to find a place to live and get employment. Government support is very limited for a very limited period of time. And I can only imagine how difficult that was during the pandemic if people came here during that time. So, Jeetan, since you help people with work and jobs and some of these things, how do new Americans navigate that difficult time after arriving here with the responsibility and burden of finding a job, finding housing, typically without the language, much English often? How can Vermont and Vermonters be more responsive? What is that time like, and how can we do better?
Great, that's a great question. So as you mentioned that I currently work as an employment and training counselor with one of the leading agencies that works with refugee, immigrant, and asylees in the state of Vermont. And one of the things that I had noticed early on was all the challenges? Where are all the where are all those invisible walls? That makes it difficult for somebody to find the job that they prefer or they have experience from their home country. Given that language also being one of the top, one of the biggest barrier for a lot of our people here. Sometime I have to, I'll be talking to someone who has a college degree from Congo, who was a teacher for 30 years and, engineer or worked in a construction field, many skill jobs, experiences, you know, uh, but when it comes to going through interview process, finding a job, all those things become too very difficult here, given you have to understand the language, you have to understand the system and all. So that's where we come in. We try to be the person in between, try to mitigate that. Talking to employer, finding alternative ways, or even advocating for providing interpreter services for interview or orientation. What I have noticed is the company that are willing to invest in early on have a better retention rate than the company that are not willing to invest on those support and services. I do go to a lot of different employers. I directly email their HRs. I plan a trip to visit their company. Just recently, last week, I was at Bloods and Owen, one of the biggest company in the state of Vermont right now. But they don't have anybody from refugee immigrant community working because they do skill jobs like welding and fabrications, all of those things. I took a group of people, like 7, 8 people, and with me, and we went there, and they were like, "This is something I could do. I can make good money as a benefit, or all this 401k, 403b. I never heard of that. Oh, they're gonna give me day off on my birthday. Oh, that's great." So I think there are all these great jobs and everywhere in Vermont, but I think employers are not doing enough to really reach out and find alternative ways, or like even providing extra support and hand holding at the beginning, providing training. A lot of these especially skill jobs like, plumbing, electrical work, construction work, people are leaving the state, they're moving out because they can't find, the job, and things are also expensive here, housing and all those things. So I think in order for a state to pay tens of thousands of dollars for people to move in, maybe they should use that money and provide trainings for those people who are already here, living with their family. They want to raise their kids here, like I do, and provide all those extra services and resources so that people can get employment.
Right. Really, really good points there. And I like to, so you are working mainly with AALV, so that's a wonderful place that people can call. And I know that employers who do take the time to work with the community are so happy that they did and have such terrific and loyal workers. So there's a real plug for employers to really do what you were saying and be open to this community. I'd like to also let our audience know you can enter questions in the chat, I believe, and we encourage you to do that. If you have comments or questions of this panel, we're very open to that and looking forward to that. So there we go. Yeah, just to confirm, you can use the chat to submit a question or comment. So I'd like to move on to the whole piece of education, and we can come back to any of these. We're moving through some of these subjects pretty quickly, but I'd like to turn to Aden and look at education and mental health. You've been involved in those for quite some time. Many refugees in particular are coming from traumatic and dangerous situations. What sort of programming or supports do new Americans need to help acclimatize to the culture here? Where would you say for education and mental health support, what can we do to really make that transitions more smoothly?
Thank you for the question. I would say in terms of education, a lot of folks have come here to get opportunities for like good quality education. And I think that through my experience, Vermont has been like trying to shift towards a more multilingual and like inclusive education system. However, we have a long way to go. It's just been a new idea of like in my experience, and I think that in terms of education, you know, everyone deserves to be able to be met where they are, especially our young folks, getting the proper quality education for them to go into uh, higher education or just like or training, uh, a training program after graduation. But there's a lot of moving pieces to make that happen, and a lot of it falls on the connection between the school districts and the parents and the child. You know, it's a three, and also the community at large too, because all of these pieces have important roles to play when it comes to education. And uh, I feel like the success of a student really depends on all of those three moving pieces to connect with each other, whatever that may mean, in terms of where everybody comes into their like on at the table. So and
Right.
yeah, that would be my 2 cents in education.
So just if you can continue just for a minute to talk about how children, I love this idea of the three, the parents, the school, and the children. And often children, because they're in school, they're learning language. And I know it's harder as an older person to learn language. Children can sometimes pick it up more quickly. So they often bear the burden of being the translator for a family. Sometimes it's about very adult issues. It might be medical or legal. And the power dynamic of a family can be shifted just because of that language capability. How does this impact youth development and the family dynamic?
Yeah, I definitely, in my experience, uh, have seen situations where children uh, are made to be like the translators when it comes to mail or just like general information about how this world works. And I think there's like a stigma behind that, since children are going through the education system in America, that they're expected to know everything, and that holds a huge burden on them. And uh, for me, growing up, I had to be in those type of situations as well. Uh, Not just being translators, but also like counselors in a way, like nurses, and even tutors too to their to younger siblings. And for me, I don't think that it's not right for children to be expected to translate for parents or for families for multiple reasons. One of them, like they're not at that age to really hold that type of weight. And you need to be certified to be able to do translating. So it definitely impacts on like their development, like psychologically, and um, yeah, and we all go through different experiences of what that impact really is like growing up. So
So we need to be more sensitive to that. And I know that Jeetan would like to add to this as well, but thank you for talking about this very sensitive issue. Jeetan.
So just to piggyback on Aden, so I think there's a whole lot of trauma going on in the household who have recently suffered, witnessed, persecution, violence in life. So, there are a lot of things that parents might have gone through, which they might not have shared with their kids, or they might not have that firsthand knowledge. So I think using children as a conduit, it's not a right perfect mean, but just if you're just trying to make a conversation, hi, hello, that should be completely fine. But if you're dealing with, a serious issue, anything that needs to, needs a professionals, then maybe not. One of the things that we do, I'm also doing right now as a cultural broker, going to different school, talking to running a group with the former refugees children, and using the trauma system therapy in a refugee model. There's the whole system that is in place that works with really understanding how the trauma travels, or how the trauma affects the household trauma, the family, or the community trauma that people have gone through. And it does have impact in children's brain, and we need to be really careful and deal with those very carefully. So, I think for folks who work in a school system or in the community, community organizations and things like that, should keep that in mind when they are talking to their parents, using children.
Great. And I would like Mohamed to come in a second, but you mentioned cultural broker, and I think a lot of people might not know what that means. Can you just tell us what a cultural broker is and does? Jeetan, I think you muted yourself. There you go.
So in my definition would be a being a bridge between two culture. Given that I was very young when I came to this country, went to high school here, went to college, so I do have a little bit of inside knowledge about this culture and American culture, and also being a Nepali myself, I understand a lot of my own culture. So I really like being there to help people understand that language could be a big barrier, and people can misunderstand you easily. And sometimes when you say something, that could be interpreted in many different ways. So being as a cultural broker, I'm there to really help people navigate any kind of cultural misconceptions.
Yeah, you're the bridge. So Mohamed, you had some thoughts about this, talking about education and children's roles.
Absolutely. I think what I would like to add is that the sad reality of this is that it has very dangerous implications as well. I mean, we are talking about children translating and helping with phone calls or mail, but children are also like 8-year-olds. I mean, I was at 8, helping with doctor's appointments as well. So trying to translate medical information and support, things that could be that are dangerous and serious at times, that I did not have the certification or the ability or skills to articulate or communicate. And I think what really needs to be noted here is that cultural gap also creates a lot of resentment within the households, between children and their parents as well, because kids are going, and one thing my parents used to say is, well, you're going to school, why don't you understand this? And I'm like, well, there's a difference between me speaking the language and then explaining a medical document that your doctor has sent, right? And like reading that and explaining what that means. There is a huge difference. The language is different. And so culturally, because there is that gap in misunderstanding, there is that misconception. And so oftentimes that gap creates these other dynamics that we don't really speak much about. And then trauma is the overlying, the bigger elephant in the room, right? And that's where a lot of that stems from. And so there's all kinds of miscommunication, and it just creates all kinds of dynamics. So I think it's really, really important to note that, especially with regards to language access, youth translating and interpreting and sometimes incredibly sensitive and important information. I mean, even school, when I would get in trouble in school, I was translating what was going on, and sometimes I would translate it the way I wanted to translate it. And so it's on a more serious note, though, that can also have its own implications, right, for safety and a million other things. And so I think that while we do discuss it somewhat lightly, it is really, really important to kind of highlight just how prevalent that is and how much of a discussion that needs to be in terms of creating that education so that parents are understanding. And again, it's a lot bigger than just a 1 or 2 time conversation. I'm glad we have started these discussions, and I'm glad that we are going to be doing, these sessions and having these panels with many other kind of panelists as well, and to kind of continue these conversations. But they're conversations to be continued.
Yes. I want to add just that. Let me play the devil advocate here. So we came as newcomers. We really try very hard to adapt and to learn, and ultimately is a success that we are trying to reach here. And without some specific tools and skills, there is no way for, and we know that, for anybody to attain that. So why would anybody agree to have a child translating for an adult? It's never done anywhere. For anybody speaking the language and understanding the language, meaning that if you do not, you are somewhat vulnerable. How will it be, in any shape or form, fair, right to actually accept something like that? I have no idea how it started, but I do believe that in the genesis of it all, the simple fact that you have a child going to a doctor's appointment with their parents, talking about specific subject, and I'm sure deep subject when it comes to their health, should be considered as right. I don't. And I do think that to this day, we should not even accepting that. And I think that we have to learn from that. This is what I'm saying. We have to learn from that specific episode. It's not only children and their parents, it's also the person himself, right? When I come somewhere, I want to be able to say what I said. I need to be able to actually express what I mean and answer to the question to the best of my ability. That's why interpretation services, right? Translation services. But for those who don't actually are able to read, translation is useless, right? But interpretation services, it's okay for a while. I do believe that investing in building the language skill in the people, it's something that is most important. I'm not saying that there is no opportunity out there, but like we were saying at the beginning, there is a lot of other stuff that families are dealing with. But to get to the language portion of it, even in the workplace anyway.
Language is critical.
Yeah, it's.
And there are some translation services that hopefully people can reach out for, but also just education for adults as well as children is so important.
Fran, if I could add just one more point.
Sure.
Oftentimes a lack of trust in the institutions and the systems, it would be the reason why parents would bring their kids. It's not to put their kids on the spot or to test their knowledge. Oftentimes it was out of necessity. It was because they trusted their children to tell them what was needed. So especially for me, having been at the births of several of my siblings that have been here at the United States, it was literally because doctors would oftentimes not even listen to her, right? Even if she was my mother herself was able to articulate what she needed, oftentimes she didn't feel as though that was being respected or heard. So that rounding the conversation back to that original point of safety and creating trust, we have systems that we have inherently not been able to trust. So again, going back to that point, kids being brought in to translate health documents also relates to that lack of trust in systems that have not created that trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really good point. I'd like to also touch on the Vermont New American Advisory Council, which you are all leaders in. You work with leaders of many divergent communities. I'm wondering about the importance of community leadership within communities and with what you all are doing. And I imagine new leaders of various communities also emerged over this very difficult last couple of years. Aden, do you want to just start with how does the Vermont New American Advisory Council work with leaders of divergent communities, and what are you looking for there?
Yeah, I think I would just start by saying that that's like our core foundation is really building leaders in New American communities to be a resource, as well as folks that like communities can lean on. I think it's really important to really have a community that you can go to, and VNAAC is a place where uh, it's an opportunity for new Americans to really find their place in terms of advocacy. And as we build onto the organization, it's it's gonna have like it's already having great impact on folks, and being able to hold different events and just spread the uh, word about really encouraging newcomers to be civically engaged and know that their community know the community that they're in, and just being an overall advocate for newcomers is really like the core work of VNAC, and I am really looking forward for it to grow and just to be more of a resource for folks.
Great. So it's amazing how we've zoomed through time. I just like to touch quickly on something that's also dear to all of your hearts, which is working to help new Americans understand and participate in democracy. And I'm wondering, and I know that Jeetan, you actually are part of a nonprofit that works on this in both New Hampshire and Vermont. How is that going? Voting is now available in many languages, which is a step forward. How are new Americans responding to that responsibility of being American? Jeetan, do you want to just touch on that?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. So I think I think a lot of time when I see like myself and my family here, we were deprived of political process for many years, living in a refugee camp, not being able to voice our concern and be part of the civic process, and being able to do that here rightfully. I think that is that's great, and also like I see that in the poly community, people are very eager to go out and vote. Whenever they see signs out there, oh, it's time for vote now. So let's, people all the time they come and ask me questions, especially my grandfather and my both of my grandparents. Okay, when are you gonna pick me, or what time we need to go vote? And that's beautiful. I think and that's what we are striving for in this organization, trying to dismantle those barriers. Like Mohamed had worked in some projects where translating the ballot so people understand what they're voting for and who they are voting for, hosting several different community forums with the candidate and asking questions that are concerning to New American communities. What are their stand on those issues? I think those are some great ways we are doing our part in terms of creating that civic engagement among our community and creating that political process.
Any other quick thoughts about either leadership and/or democracy and becoming a part of that system?
Yes.
Sandrine.
Democracy and be part of the process. Coming from an authoritarian country, Mohamed said it, there is no right to vote or to vote a certain way. It's the way of the person in power, right? It's what we do is not only to make on this, to try to engage, to have people engage, is to understand how powerful a voice is. And until this is understood, there is a process of education that needs to be made. There is a connection that needs to be made between, the trust that is not there, the understanding of what the process is, and actually the voice that needs to be flushed out of because this is your own. But I do believe that when it comes to the community, this is why community leaders are very important. Is that it's the to frame the voice. It's what is important to you as a community, to you as a society, and then to bring it to the level where the people have the right to choose and have an influence on what is chosen, on what the decisions are, what type of decision are made, and actually to object when it's not something in our best interest. So the whole process that is definitely needed, and the connection with the political, okay, and the legal process in this country is a long one. Very tricky, complicated one, but this is a must. It is a must for anyone, and it's a must for us. And we are definitely starting to get the education piece on track. We're just started with a lot of forums, a lot of trainings, a connection with our state leaders, conversations about what exactly they are saying that they are bringing to the table, or even listen to what the needs are. Even though the community is small, it's not because it is small that they do not have the right to voice their opinions. So, that platform that is needed, that is actually not really there. It is definitely the door that we are trying to open, and we are really trying to bring the community with us. It's not a VNAAC kind of a thing. It's a community movement. It's a community system change that we want to bring. And we are just started. So, Aden, oh no, Mohamed, you have not spoken. I do believe. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mohamed, I know that this is also very dear to your heart, and you really helped get many of these translations onto the ballot, or to help people understand even what a ballot was and what they were looking at.
Yeah. I mean, as Sandrine was saying kind of earlier on, communication is one of the most important things for any species, for anything and everything. It's really important that people have access to everything, and anything that is said in English should also be accessible to everyone in any other language that they might need it in. So I'm definitely honored to be working with VNAAC and a bunch of other incredible people who have committed to this work lifelong and have been doing it long before I've been doing it, and will probably be doing it long after I stop doing it, and everything in between. So I mean, language is everything, and access to that is everything. And I think that is one of the biggest measures of community, is whether or not with all the languages we have, we can still exist and communicate. And I am a firm believer that every single individual that is an inhabitant of any space is responsible for making that space safe and livable for everyone. So I do think that every single newcomer is responsible for getting involved in democracy, and for making sure that they're voting, and for making sure that the space that they call home is home on their accord, and that they are really getting involved and getting to be a part of the community that we're building. Or unless we're all involved, it's just not a community. So.
One of the things that we're trying to do tonight actually is to create community and be there for your communities and all of Vermont. Vermont is a bigger community. We hope to do this again, that this is just the beginning of some conversations about some of these things that we've touched on. And as we start getting close to the end, and we might come back with some of these or see what we've missed, but I would like to ask you all, ways in which Vermont has proved to be a good place for new American communities to settle and thrive. I know we have a long way to go. There are many things that are missing, so you might want to bring up those as well. But are there some successes that we've had? And or, one thing that you would say also that the community needs as we move forward into the future. So I'd like to hear that from all of you, things that are working, and that those one or two things that we really need to focus on as we move into the future. I'll start with our president, Sandrine.
Thank you, Fran. Vermont Vermont is definitely willing. This is what I've seen. Moving very slowly, but still willing. The change is palpable, and when it is, when the change comes, it's a huge change, an impactful change. But yes, it comes slowly. Um, I have to say that when it comes to the New American community or even the immigrant community, we the people are concentrated in one part of the state, and this is the northwestern part of the state. We see more and more and more people moving towards Vermont, but still we are seeing a very huge concentration being in that little bubble of ours, right? And I see that the system in place to welcome newcomers is trying to be improved somewhat. So it's not only, with funding through the state or through the cities, it is with the community itself, really trying to engage and understand the differences and try to accept as a community, right? There is a lot of interest, and that's great, right? It's that you have section of any communities where you have the radical that is still there and will all still be there anyway. It would never die, I do believe. But you have a huge interest, and it starts with that, right? And the fact that we call ourselves a society and a community where we want safety, healthy, inclusive, and rich communities to actually live and belong, we need to do the work, and it takes all of us. And I think that we are, in some way, Vermont is that place, and that's why like I said at the beginning, I visited and I live in other places,
Yeah.
and I decided to stay here for a reason. I have my children here, I have family here. So I'm not going to dive into what I do not see.
Slow, but it's really happening.
Yes, but there is a lot happening. I do believe that we are somewhat very fortunate to have come here and to have actually forged, family, not only family but roots here, and it's an effort.
We're almost out of time, so I want to
Oh, I'm
pose this to
sorry.
everybody
Yes.
else. Thank you, Sandrine. Aden, how would you say Vermont is doing, and what's one thing we need to look for as we move into the future?
I would definitely echo what President Sandrine just said around that we are making the change, but it's very, very, very slow. And but there is willingness to make changes happen if brought to the table by those who understand what changes need to be made, and like have lived experiences as well to really contribute. I think there's like folks who are allies of making those changes, which is great in terms of moving forward. I just want to give a shout out to like multilingual liaisons in the school districts, really pushing for those changes and like communicating with new American communities in terms of their education. And yeah, there's a long road ahead of us, but I definitely feel like folks are willing to make some changes.
Great. Well, and we just got someone who said, how can community institutions like public libraries help? So I know there are people out there that do want to do better and are interested. So that may or may not be part of your response to this, but I'll go to Jeetan now about your thoughts about how is Vermont doing, and how can we do better as we move into the future?
Great. So I think one of the things I was talking to someone recently about, and she happened to work at the library, and a couple of things like, bringing more books. I think sometime, a lot of the families are looking for the books in their home languages just to give a glimpse of their own culture, being, like to be able to go to the library and pick a book that the father or mother could read to their child in their home language means a lot. So I think being creative and coming up with some community engagement ideas might be something that would be very beneficial. I know there are a bunch of libraries around have done some work. Burlington, the library down at Burlington had done a bunch of work in the past through AmeriCorps. When I was serving as AmeriCorps team leader several years back, and there might be some resources that you can share, among different libraries. Definitely, reaching out to the community, having events, bringing books to people in a different community, celebrations, events that are happening. So I think there are various ways that can be addressed.
Great, thank you. And Mohamed, do you want to close up this session of many, we hope? How are we doing, and where can we be better?
Vermont, I think we're doing okay. We can definitely be better in a lot of areas. I think that one thing that I will give credit to the state of Vermont is access to our legislators and just policymakers. I think that I personally have found it relatively easy to kind of call things out and say, hey, this is an area of concern. This is an area that we need to focus a little bit of attention on. And I've found that I've similarly been able to kind of build that relationship with the Secretary of State's office as well. So just kind of feeling like there is, to that point that Sandrine was making, there is room for the change that we want to make. It seems like we do want these changes. They are difficult. It will take work. And I know that we don't always want to do the work, but I definitely do want to echo what our president said, in that there is room here to do this work. And, just having had VNAAC and members in VNAAC cultivate a lot of those relationships and having already created those networks, it does feel like there is an opportunity to do those things. So, and seeing that kind of play out, even just in our ability to connect with our senators, our congressmen and women, I think is really indicative of that. And so that's how I'll round it out by saying Vermont is at work. We have access to the people that are making our laws and policies. And I think that goes a long way. Government is the most important and the biggest and strongest tool that we have to affect change. And if we can access it, obviously that means that we're that much closer. And with regards to the institutions like public libraries being more welcoming, just asking around. I mean, even just in this forum, asking this question, being intentional, joining the conversations, partnering with organizations like VNAAC and asking how you can be supportive. And a lot of the times it is just listening. And I know that that's not a very direct answer, but trying to be intentional about reaching out to folks in the New American community and newcomers to say, hey, we might not have the books, but how can we be supportive? And there are a million other ways that I think that libraries and other institutions that might not have a lot of money can still be supportive.
And so thanks to you all. And I also note that Sandrine, in response to that, said, you can hire bilingual staff, or if you don't have the money, you can look for volunteers who are willing to provide that service at libraries, because language, of course, is that piece. I see that Ty has put up some resources for getting involved. You can volunteer with U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. That used to be called the Vermont Refugee Resettlement Program. AALV is often looking for people. Just reach out. Maybe it's somebody in your library that you can begin to have this conversation about how can we be more supportive of new Americans. I want to thank Mohamed, Sandrine, Jeetan, Aden for their participation in tonight's panel. It was really eye-opening and wonderful to be here with you all tonight. We hope that this is just the first of many discussions about diverse communities in Vermont. I also want to thank Ty Robertson, who coordinated this event, and to Mike Dunn for directing the program tonight. Thank you all. I'm sorry we've got to close now. Our time is up. So thank you all for joining us for Vermont Public. I'm Fran Stoddard, and good night to you all.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.